What's up, Wizards? It's Deb, SBMTG. We like it a magic, and you're back to the best show on YouTube with your progressively unshaven host. We're looking at Wilds of Eldraine spoilers today, as usual, and we got another 20 to go over. And I'm not in the business of wasting your time. That's valuable, so let's go ahead and get to them. Let's begin today's aerobics with some light common work. We got Prophetic Prism, as well as Kellen's Light Slash and Furious Firebolt. Now, Prism is a reprint. It's been reprinted a bunch of times at this point, but just in case you've never seen it, Alex, it costs 2 mana. It's an artifact, and when it ETBs, you draw a card. You can pay 1 and tap it to add a mana of any color. Little mana fixing, draw a card, artifact to bargain away in limited. Seems pretty good there, but most of us know what Prophetic Prism is. A little boring, but again, cool applications in limited this time around. I see why they reprinted it. But yeah, let's look at Kellen's Light Slash. Why not? And I know it's supposed to be like he is slashing with light, but I always read this like it's just a light slash, just not too heavy, just a light little slash. It's 2 mana, 1 and a white for an instant with bargain. It does 3 damage to an attacking or blocking creature, but if you bargained it, you destroy that creature instead. Not too bad in terms of limited removal, but that's pretty much all you get here. I know there might be like 1 or 2 of you in the comments section might want to try this card out in standard. Maybe there's a thing you can do with it. Let me know how that goes. Give it a shot, but I'm not too sure about it just yet. So I'll move on to Furious Firebolt. 3 mana, 2 and a red for an instant that does X damage to a creature, and a creature only, where X is 2 plus the number of cards in your graveyard that are instant, sorcery, or adventures. Another decent piece of limited removal here, but again, I really don't think it goes anywhere beyond that. I think we already have options in standard that take out like 5 toughness creatures a lot easier than this. That said, I guess you could make the argument that this can take out like 8 toughness creatures at the end of the game, and if you have reason to do that, then maybe you play a copy or 2 of this in a very, very specific kind of deck, but the applications are so narrow that I'm just really not seeing it. We got Water Wings, as well as Mocking Sprite and Freeze in Place. Now, Water Wings is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for an instant. Until EOT, target creature you control has base power and toughness 4/4 and gains flying, and hexproof. Now, I don't think that this is going to be too much better at all, really, than a lot of the 1 mana options that decks like Mono Blue already have. Still a cool version of this effect, though. They're trying, you know. So let's move on to Mocking Sprite. Just 3 mana, 2 and a blue for 2/1 Faerie Rogue with flying. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. I do think this is probably priced out of standard at 3 mana, but it is an undoubtedly powerful effect that we've seen on a few cards in the past. But a lot of those cards cost 2 mana for this kind of cost reduction, so I'm just not really confident in this, even given the decent creature types that we've gotten here. But again, in limited, seems like a pretty decent little signpost, especially at common, for the sort of blue-red spells deck that definitely does exist. And, you know, the limited fairies deck too, but I guess that's a given. I don't see a whole lot of playable standard fairies at this point. I've seen a couple of playable looking cards that want you to have fairies out for them to become playable, but for those to be playable, you have to have playable fairies. So I'm still kind of waiting on a few more good ones of those, and I'm not sure this quite cuts the mustard, so I'll move on to Freeze in Place. 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a sorcery. Tap target creature an opponent controls and put 3 stun counters on it. Scry 2. You know, if this wasn't a sorcery, we might actually be talking about like standard mono blue or something like that. This card is almost powerful. All 3 of the cards on screen are almost powerful, but not quite. That said, just like the other cards on screen and the others that we've talked about in this video so far, it does look like it's somewhat powerful and limited. This is effectively a blue removal spell for a while, at least. It's really not terrible. Let's move on to some better blue 2-drops like Spell Stutter, the last common of the day, and we might as well go ahead and breach the uncommons with Picklock Prankster, another fairy. Now, Spell Stutter is the better card on screen. It's 2 mana, 1 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2 plus an additional 1 for each fairy you control. I was just talking about these. We keep seeing cards that look pretty decent if you got a fairy or 2 out, but no truly great fairies yet. So again, I sort of need to reserve judgment on how good this card is until we see whether or not the fairies deck actually comes together in standard. That said, just at the baseline, these have always been decent cards, and even if you have 1 fairy out, suddenly it just is Mana Leak. So thank God they didn't just reprint Spell Stutter Sprite. I'll take the reference, but it would have been kind of a nightmare to just have the actual card. Well, let's look at Picklock Prankster here. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 1/3 Fairy Rogue with flying and vigilance. Not a terrible deal, but you also have Free the Fae over here, an instant for 1 and a blue. Mill 4 cards, then put an instant, sorcery, or fairy card from among the milled cards into your hand. There are so many just like very well balanced looking, at least it appears to me, adventures in this set, right? The creature's not busted or anything. It's just a 2 mana 1/3 flying vigilance, but that's fine. Like that's just a fine rate. Sure, why not? As well, you get this incredible instant, which is actually the cool part of the card. I like milling myself. I like putting cards in my graveyard. That's fine. I also like getting some sort of advantage off of that. And I also like this instant in decks like Mono Blue, sure, why not, that care about having instants and sorceries in their graveyard for cards like Tolarian Terror and Haughty Djinn and stuff like that. Just the fact that this card is instant speed really kind of makes it potentially work, but it's got to earn its slots in Standard where there might be just better ways to use those slots. You only got 60 cards in a deck. There's all kinds of different sorts of decks that might want this, whether it's fairies or perhaps Mono Blue, although I do kind of doubt it, honestly. Or some sort of, Sultai self-mill that wants to do some stuff in its graveyard. It's just a cool little piece for a bunch of different decks to consider, but I'm not sure any of them ultimately pick this up. Let's keep going in the uncommons here. We're having fun. Let's look at Graceful Takedown, Stormkeld Vanguard, and Boundary Lands Ranger next. Now, Takedown might actually be the best card on the screen. This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a sorcery. Oops. Any number of target enchanted creatures you control and up to one other target creature you control each deal damage equal to their power to target creature you don't control. So that's a lot of words, and it keeps going back and forth. If you're not really into Magic parlance, maybe that just sounded like a bunch of boop-a-doop-a-doop to you. But basically, all of your dudes, all of your enchanted guys just gang up on one guy. I don't know why this is called Graceful Takedown. I think the flavor of this is just a bunch of dudes get together to bite a guy to death. That doesn't seem super graceful. Same kind of story here with Stormkeld Vanguard. This has a relatively strong-looking adventure half, but it's a sorcery, so I'm just not sure, Vanguard itself is 6 mana, 4 and 2 green for a 6/7 giant warrior that can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. You guys really got to keyword that ability. It's been too long. But it also has this sorcery half, Beat Down. There hasn't been a card called Beat Down yet? Okay, sure. It's 2 mana, 1 and a green for a sorcery. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Okay. Oh, it seems kind of all right, I don't like the sorcery speed on the adventure, and I'm going to point that out every time I see it, but bust up artifact and enchantment, you're trading instant speed on your naturalize for a big old man, like somewhere down the road. But I keep praising these adventures, this set, these kind of uncommon adventures that have a halfway decent, spell half, and then kind of a big burly creature. I'm not as sure about this one necessarily, but I guess green is a little bit more able to ramp into the, creature half of this once you cast the adventure. So I don't absolutely hate it, but again, in green, if you're going to run that color, you have like Boseiju at instant speed to bust up artifacts and enchantments. Doesn't really take up a slot in your deck. Probably better than this. If you want multiples of that effect, you might even have better options. So I'm just not convinced on cards like this in total in the set. It seems like every color gets 1 or 2, right? But this one looks okay, but I'm not quite willing to put the stamp on it. Let's move on to Boundary Lands Ranger then. BLD Blad is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/2 human ranger. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Okay, that's sure. Blad, that doesn't seem too bad. Why didn't your parents just name you Brad? That seems better. But Blad, sure. Blad the Impaler. He's not terrible, just a 2 mana 2/2 is, it's no longer a good rate. I say that much, but it is really not too difficult in today's day and age, in Standard even, to have like a big old hulking man out that, or lady, who knows, but one way or the other, it's not too hard to draw a card off of this. Now you got to pitch a card to do that, but you can turn that into an upside. I'm going to say Reanimator. I say it all the time. I'll say it again before the video is over. Now, the limited portion of this talk is only going to take 5 seconds. In limited, I think this card is cracked. I think it's actually very, very good in limited there. Let's move on to a couple of green 2-drops that actually look okay, man. It was just 2-drop bonanza this afternoon, man. We got a lot of good-looking stuff. So let's look at Up the Beanstalk and Welcome to Sweet Tooth. That's a name, man. But Up the Beanstalk is 2 mana, 1 and a green for an enchantment. When it ETBs and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, draw a card. Cool. That's just a cool card. It's an enchantment. You can bargain it away. Stuff that cares about you putting enchantments into play. This, procs, triggers. So I don't know. That's all I can really say about it. It's pretty self-evident what the uses of the card are, but I still think it might be slightly too narrow to see a whole lot of Standard play. We've seen a lot of enchantments like that this set that have like some value in the ETB, and sure, bargain them away, who cares? And this is one of those. I like that about it. But if it does stay on the table, maybe it draws you a couple more cards. Like, it actually seems pretty decent, especially even in like Commander. I could see this really paying off over a few turns, so I really like this. Let's take a look at Welcome to Sweet Tooth, and if you look too closely, that's not not icing. It's 2 mana, 1 and a green for a Saga. On chapter 1, you get a 1/1 white human creature token. On chapter 2, you create a food token. You getting the flavor here? And then on chapter 3, you put X +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, where X is 1 plus the number of foods you control. So sort of at the baseline here. Well, I guess on the floor of the card, you just get your dude blown away and no value beyond that. But this kind of sucks. But, I guess theoretically, the card by itself is going to make a 2 mana 3/3 and a food token. That's kind of just a little bit fine, but in the meantime, again, you have an enchantment for bargaining, you get a food token for bargaining, you get a 1/1 token for bargaining. If you want to bargain in limited, this is the card right here, but maybe it's somewhat playable in standard too, and these kind of like green, probably green-black, but really green-X, like mid-range decks that look to be shaping up with this set, right? All the sort of food-themed stuff that we're seeing. Looks to be green-black, but in decks like that, I could definitely see this providing a ton of value. You can use the food token, cash that in for all kinds of different stuff. So cool little card for only a couple of mana here. I think this is decent value. But hey, let's look at the last couple of uncommons of the day already. We're making good time. Didn't even have to stop for bathroom breaks. It's pretty good. We'll be at the Grand Canyon soon. But let's look at Cheeky House Mouse. Love it. And Spellscorn Coven here. Now, Cheeky House Mouse, pretty obviously good looking, I think. But Spellscorn Coven, a little bit more sleepery in my mind. But I tend to overrate these cards in this set. You've got me on in the comment section so far, but we'll see. But let's look at Cheeky House Mouse first. A lot of adventure creatures today, and these last two are no different. House Mouse itself is just a single white mana for a 2/1 mouse. That's all it does. I don't know how a mouse is 2 power. That's so scary when you think about like the power scaling in Magic the Gathering. I'm blathering. Let's look at Squeak By, which is the adventure half of this. Just a single white mana for a sorcery. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater this turn. Now this I do think would be like much better at instant speed, but it's still fine. As a sorcery, it's just a single mana. You don't have to come up too much of your investment to actually play this card during your turn. You are kind of exposing yourself to removal effects and blah, blah, blah because it's sorcery speed, but it's still a pretty good little package. The real tension here is, do you play this on turn 1 as a Savannah Lions, which is kind of just a good enough card, historically at least. Not sure it's as good as it used to be, but it's still fun. Or do you hold this in your hand, play something else on turn 1, and then use this ability turn 2, play the mouse, that's all your mana, right? Again, there's some tension here in how you play this, but there's also an awful lot of choice, and it's not terrible off the top of your library like a Savannah Lions. Savannah Lions? What's that? A Savannah Lions might usually be in the later game, right? At least this can provide some extra value outside of just being a dorky little guy. So I do like a lot about this. I think it's a pretty playable card, even in a format where we have a lot of good Savannah Lions right now. But Spellscorn Coven, there's just something about this one, y'all. It's 4 mana, 3 and a black for a 2/3 Faerie Warlock with flying. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. But here's the adventure half. It's Take It Back. 3 mana, 2 and a blue for an instant. Return target spell to its owner's hand. Oh, we got a little Divide by 0 back in standard. Or is it a Remand? It's not quite a Remand, but in some ways it's better. They phrased it such that like spells that can't be countered can be countered in air quotes by this card. So that's kind of sick right there. Just 3 mana for this effect has been pretty decent in the recent past. So just remember that, and you're stapling it to a guy that can then force them to discard the card. I mean, it's a 4 mana 2/3 flyer. Those are not good stats, and I'm not here to pretend that they are. But if you do catch them spending their mana on turn 3 or 4, you hit them with this, and then you just immediately play this card on your turn when you play a land or something, then like, you can be pretty mad about that, I imagine, especially if you are later on in the game in sort of a top deck situation where they get like their big bomb or their one card that wins in the game, and you end up sticking them the card back in their hand. And when it comes back around to your turn, you make them discard it. So if they can't just recast it. So I don't know, man. There's some cool things about this. I do not much care for the body on this, but I think that anytime you see a card like Remand or Divide by 0, you got to start paying attention to it. Just altogether, I think this is one we need to look out for. I'm not going to babble on about it forever, but I do think this is one that might be better than it looks. Now, I can't babble on forever because we got to get to the rares. I wanted to rush you over here. Go ahead and part the velvet rope. Let you in right this way, sir or madam. Here we are. Here's the rares. Starting with Devouring Sugar Maw. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 black for a 6/6 horror. That's a pretty good rate already. And then you slap Menace and Trample on it to make it better. What's the downside? It has one. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token. If you don't, tap Devouring Sugar Maw. Now, the adventure half on here is Have for Dinner. It is 2 mana, 1 and a white for an instant. Okay. Create a 1/1 white human creature token and a food token. First of all, Kev Walker just never misses, does he? Just 25 years, a quarter century of solid work. Just every time you see a piece, Kev, you're doing great. But anyway, aside from that, the card looks okay, right? I'm not sure it's great because we've got stuff like Archfiend of the Dross in Standard that is arguably better than a card like this, and it just doesn't really see a whole lot of play outside of like fight rigging memes and stuff. So I don't know how great it is. I guess some mono black players play Archfiend, but still, I think you'd probably rather play that than this most of the time. And oh yes, Sheoldred exists as well. So I'm not too sold on it, but boy, is it a cool card. Isn't this a cool card, especially when you add the adventure half to it? The fact the adventure half is an instant, I get to sort of flip my perspective this time. This time it's actually an instant, you know? That's really, really nice. The fact that it's kind of a raise the alarm, reinforced, whatever it's called, resolute reinforcements. Thank you, brain. It's the name of the card. It's kind of one of those, but you lose a creature token and you get a food instead. Could be really good for a bunch of decks. Note that obviously it puts stuff on the table that you can bargain to it, but you can also bargain that stuff away to other things too. Just if you do get this in limited, it's really, really nice because it's going to help out your bargain themes and all that. But in Standard, there's a possibility that some sort of Orzhov aggro deck that might be coming together with this set might want this. But in Orzhov aggro, again, he's got all these amazing choices for 4-drops. So I have to see it to believe it, but I am a little bit impressed by a 4 mana 6/6 Trample Menace that also like has a 2 mana instant adventure on it that also affects the board state. Like, yeah, the card is very good. I'm not saying it's not, but at 4 mana in black specifically, you have to be extremely good to be worthy of consideration nowadays. So I'm rooting for it. I hope that it can do something in Standard, but I'm not seeing it just yet, which is heartbreaking. It just really hurts. It cakes my heart. Terrible. Sorry. Let's move on to Faerie Slumber Party. Faerie Slumber Party! It's 4 mana, 4 and 2. Sorry for busting your eardrums there. It seems like some 90s, like a Barbie commercial in the 90s. Faerie Slumber Party! 6 mana. What's the card do? 4 and 2 blue for a sorcery. Return all creatures to their owner's hands. For each opponent who controlled a creature returned this way, you create 2 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens with flying, and this creature can block only creatures with flying. Okay, so it's an evacuation or some effect like that, but I pay a little extra mana and I get 6 guys in Commander. It seems okay, you know. Probably everyone's going to have a dude to return, but if they don't, I get 4 guys? Whatever, it still seems fine. Never have enough dudes to make a cheeseburger. That's sad, but still getting a lot of little dudes off of this in combination with an effect that's been busted in Commander forever. So probably going to be important there until the end of time. And that kind of means something nowadays. Or does it anymore? I feel like a lot of cards they preview in Standard sets are like, well, that's going to be good in Commander forever. So I don't know if that's actually special anymore, but I'm not going to take it away from you Commander players. It looks like a special card in your format. It's actually the second blue sweeper that we've seen in this set so far, and I'm not that impressed by either one, to be honest. I think this is a little bit too much mana in like constructed, 60 card constructed formats. Commander's a constructed environment. I don't want to take that away from it either, but you know, I also want to say competitive environments. That also seems backhanded to Commander players. So in 60 card constructed environments, that's as carefully as I can say it. I'm just not sure the card quite hacks it. Let's check out Yenna, Red Tooth Region here. 4 mana, 2, a green and a white for a 4/4 legendary elf noble. You can pay 2 and tap her to choose target enchantment you control that doesn't have the same name as another permanent you control. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it isn't legendary. If the token is an aura, untap Yenna, Red Tooth Regent, then scry 2. Activate only as a sorcery. Okay, really interesting commander. And I don't mean just in commander. This is a good commander, I would assume. Just being able to copy your enchantments and stuff in a singleton format seems very, very powerful. But, you know, it's got that commander bug where outside of commander, I'm not too sure. In standard, it's 4 mana for a 4/4 ho-hum. You got to wait till the next turn to use it. And then you got to pay mana to use it. Come on, you got to have a decent, juicy target for it. It kind of restricts what you can play on the turn after you play it because you got to save mana. I don't know, man. It seems like a pretty powerful effect if you can actually make it snap off, but I'm not too invested in it in standard. But in commander, this looks like a pretty nice new commander to build something around. It seems all right. Let's check out Gruff Triplets next. These guys are interesting. 6 mana, 3 and 3 green for a 3/3 Satyr Warrior with Trample. When it ETBs, if it isn't a token, create 2 tokens that are copies of it, and then when it dies, you put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to its power on each creature you control named Gruff Triplets. So I guess when the second one dies, the last one will be a 9/9, at least theoretically. That's pretty okay. I mean, again, in limited, I could see this kind of taking over a game, but even in standard, it's a neat little ramp or reanimation target, especially if you have the ability to flicker it, perhaps, and then just get a bunch of tokens every time. That seems kind of gross, but even then, one sweeper takes it out, and there's probably better stuff to play for 6 mana. There's better stuff to reanimate, so I'm not, again, convinced about this card in standard either, but I really like the design, and sometimes I'm kind of allowed to just like that and freak out about it a little bit. So it's 3 Billy Goats Gruff. That's a fun reference. We didn't get a whole lot of that the first time. Why didn't we get Billy Goats Gruff the first time? I guess they realized that. They wanted to make a card around it, and I really like, again, what they ended up doing with it. Design is awesome on this one, but kind of a bulk big green guy with a cool design. We see those in a lot of sets, and I'm allowed to still be a little bit excited about them. So I like this thing. But our last 3 cards of the day, before I reload the spoiler sites and see if there's anything new, are actually pretty playable looking to me. We got Goddric, Cloaked Reveler here. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 red for a 3/3 legendary human noble with haste and celebration. As long as 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn, Goddric, Cloaked Reveler is a dragon with base power and toughness 4/4, flying, and fire breathing. Has red dragons you control. Get +1/+0 till end of turn. Okay, so a 3 mana, 3/3 haste that synergizes, by the way, with Kumano Faces Kakazan in such a way that if you play Kumano on turn 1, then turn 3, it'll enter the battlefield as a 2/2, and then you play Goddric, and suddenly you're swinging for 6, and 4 of it flies, and it's just kind of gross. So that seems like a pretty decent line right there. But of course, if you just play this on turn 4 into one other thing somehow, then still, an effective 4 mana, 4/4 flying haste is still pretty good. And then later turns in the game, if you can engineer ways to get a bunch of stuff on the battlefield, and it's pretty easy to do that just one card at a time. In this set, there's a bunch of stuff. It's one card that creates 2 things. This guy, even as a legendary, I think is maybe worth at least 2 or 3 of as an attempted, slot in mono red. There's a few things you could play in this slot instead, but mono red is actually not flush with incredible 3-drops right now. So again, mostly just because we have Kumano in the format and a bunch of other cheap red permanents that you can play. I think that this is probably worth giving at least a try out. I'm not sure it ends up making the cut, but it looks really, really close. This is a fit card. Also, don't think the dragons you control mode escapes me on this one. If you have a Shivan Devastator or any number of other dragons in standard, then obviously this becomes kind of disgusting. Just going to really bust it on this card because a single red mana for kind of a dragon anthem effect, +1/+0 at a time, can be great if you have enough of your mana open. So really kind of do like it. I also like it with, Realm Scorcher Dragon or whatever it's called. We just reviewed it the other day because when that comes into play, it gives you 4 mana of any color. So, or is it just, it's 4 mana when it comes into play. So if you play that with a Goddric in play, it gives you 4 mana to play something else and make Goddric a dragon, and then any extra mana can be pumped to make both Goddric and Realm Scorcher bigger. So these are cool little interactions here, and Goddric goes beyond that in terms of all the weird little interactions in standard. So I think we're talking about a potential player here. Dude looks kind of good. Let's move on to Pollen Shield Hare here. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/2 rabbit. Creature tokens you control get +1/+1. It also has hair raising. Yuck, yuck. It's just a single green mana for a sorcery. Target creature you control gains vigilance. Vigilance? What? That's not even a word. Vigilance. And gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. I really, really badly want to like this card. I think that maybe there's supposed to be a green-white tokens deck. that doesn't actually exist, but like Wizards design standard in mind with that deck, assuming that deck would be a thing. And like so far, it just hasn't really. It's got a lot of pieces, and like nobody cares. Naya tokens with like Jetmir, but again, just like no one plays the deck. So we got to figure out ways to make that deck stronger. And this looks pretty decent at doing that. It's an intangible virtue on the creature half, but of course it's a little easier to remove than an intangible virtue, so watch out. But it's still that card in standard, and also a rabbit. You could play a rabbit in your deck, and I think we're all kind of down for that, right? And the spell half of it is great when drawn at the right time. I kind of do hate that this one's a sorcery. If it were instant speed, I think it would be like a million, just light years better if you could cast this after blocks or something. I would just spaghetti. That would be good. I don't even know what that means, but I like spaghetti. That's probably what it means. But in any case, just a sweet little card. But there are a few things holding me back from really loving it. That said, awesome piece, of course, for green-white tokens decks moving forward if they do want to play it. And I think they probably do. But final card of the day so far, at least, is Heartflame Duelist. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 3/1 human knight. Instant and sorcery spells you control have lifelink. Nice. And it's got Heartflame Slash, 2 and a red for an instant. Heartflame Slash deals 3 damage to any target. All right, now we're getting there, right? Someone's in the kitchen, they're cooking, it's smelling nice. This is Soulfire Grandmaster a little bit. Hello, is that actually you? Not quite. Soulfire Grandmaster did have this like nice little mana sink on it that could break games late if you had the extra mana. Often you did. So I really like that about SFGM, but this is a little bit different. Still very good though. You could compare this to Bone Crusher Giant too if you're in the business of making comparisons, and I guess technically I am. So it's kind of like a Bone Crusher Giant, but not as good, but still potentially pretty playable. I mean, this one has the same kind of tension that the Savannah Lion's Mouse had, right? Like, do I play this on turn 2, or do I save it as a removal spell, or just go face with it or something like that? I like that kind of tension. It all adds up to, in reality, versatility rather than tension. So I like that about it, man. Just a 2 mana 3/1 that can trade in combat, deal a hefty chunk to, naked opponents. Not literally, like they don't have creatures. Don't. Playing against naked people, something weird. Strip magic, don't do that. But actually, consenting adults, have as much fun as you want to. But still, where was I? The card looks good. That's my actual job, is to tell you whether or not cards look good in my subjective opinion. This one looks really, really good. Again, just removal, instant speed, removal that can go face on the one side of it, and then Soulfire Grandmaster text on the other side. Like, sign me. I'm going to sign it in whatever liquid you would like me to sign it in. I got a couple. But that's it for today's spoilers, and I'm mostly sitting up here to prove to you that I'm wearing pants. I had somebody in the comments section the other day say, this guy's just wearing his boxers. No, I wear these pants pretty much every time I record lately. They're Dragon Ball Z pajama pants. I'm almost 40. But that's just my generation, lost in a sea of things that we used to love, abandoned by a hope that was promised with no receipt. Hence this YouTube channel, which you should subscribe to, by the way. If you also want to help keep the lights on around here, you could always support us on Patreon. It's just $1 a month, and you'll get to vote on what decks we do once Wilds of Eldraine officially hits the streets. Don't you want to be part of that? Affect the course of YouTube history. Pick what decks we do when we start Eldraine Standard. I don't know why I said it that way. We're getting the Wild West set like next year. I should save that voice for the Wild West, the Outlaws of Thunder Junction. That's actually what they're calling the set. If you didn't know, it's called Outlaws of Thunder Junction. I just can't wait. I can't wait for that goofy thing. Western theme set. We'll give it a shot. Anyway, that's not for a while. That's for like another year from now or whatever it is. We're looking at Wilds of Eldraine right now, and it's looking pretty good. I didn't think every single card from today's batch was like super playable in standard, but there were a lot of like niche cards that might be role players here or there. And honestly, those are my favorite cards. I don't want for a card to be like busted, super playable in standard, dictates the colors that you play. And if you are in those colors, you have to play this card because it's so good. Those are terrible. I don't like those cards. What I like are cards that show up every now and then and do like a super specialized thing and then rope out of there like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. Just go straight back up through the roof on that string, and then they're out of there. But you never actually see them. You don't know they're there. Those are my favorite cards. I don't even like Mission Impossible. Why did I make that? I've never seen a Mission Impossible movie. I don't know why I made that exact comparison. But anyway, I'm done for the day. So just do all the stuff. Check us out on Twitch, Patreon, links in the description, all the other videos we've done this season on spoiler season. And I'll see you guys again tomorrow night. Just let me know how you felt about everything down there in the comments section. And I'll catch you cats later. I am Deb from the place. I don't know what the hand movements. They tell you when you're on YouTube to do hand movements. Just do keep confirming and denying things, you know. But anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind. Sorry. Spread love and be kind.